So listen to this. 100 goal contributions in 164 matches for a 21-year-old midfielder who somehow has already spent 466 days sidelined with an injury. That alone is enough to make Florian Wirtz one of the biggest mysteries in Europe. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that he's also the reason why the greatest dynasty in the history of German football has fallen. The reason why a 120-year-long curse was broken. The boy is rewriting the history books of football while 150 million euro bids get thrown at him, and yet no one really knows that much about him. He simply refuses to be another cog in the wonderkid marketing machine. No interviews, no guest appearances, no brand deals or signature boots, no journalists tweeting out his every move, nothing. So little is known about him, most fans don't even realize that he wasn't a Leverkusen player to begin with, that Leverkusen broke an 18-year-long peace treaty in order to sign him, that he was the first step in their plan to take down Bayern years before Xabi Alonso even arrived. Look, in 2001, Köln gave a 12-year-old named Marco Quachala an 8-year contract with a rumored sign-on fee of 120,000 euros, which at the time was a millionaire offer. Regardless, that was already controversial in itself. I mean, just because it's football doesn't mean it isn't child labor, but somehow, what really pissed people off was that they had snatched the kid straight from Leverkusen's academy right across town. But thankfully, before they got into a pissing match seeing which club could lure the most kids into their training ground, the three big clubs in town got together and made a gentleman's agreement not to poach players from each other's academies, which was good for over a decade, until two kids arrived at Köln. Florian Wirtz and his sister Julianne. Because if you didn't know that either, not only has his sister gone pro as well, last year she was Werder Bremen's player of the season. Matter of fact, the whole family is crazy about sports. The mom is a handball coach, the dad was the chairman of a whole club, and one of the sisters even works for a football agency handling the social media of players like Götze and Toni Kroos. But regardless, let me get back to the problem at hand. Only a couple years after arriving at Köln, Wirtz was already being described as the best player to come to the club in 30 years, and with every passing season, it became more and more tempting for the other clubs in town to break the agreement. At 14, Wirtz was already playing for the club's under-17s. A year later, he joined the under-16 national team, and the year after that, well, it took Köln to the final stage of the Junior Bundesliga, scored against Bayern in the semi-finals, and then assisted the opener in the final against Moukou's Dortmund to make Köln junior champions for only the third time in their history. At this point, he had damn near every great club in Europe after him. There were rumors all the way from Man City to Juventus and Barcelona. Bayern and Liverpool had even invited him to get a tour of their club grounds. But no matter what, Wirtz rejected everyone, insisting that he would not leave his hometown until he finished his studies, convincing Köln that they had the next Lukasz Podolski in their hands. However, there was one other option. Seeing how Köln were not only stuck in a relegation battle, but had been careless enough to run Wirtz's contract down to the last year without renewing, while Leverkusen themselves were the one team who could offer Wirtz first-team top-level football without the need of ever leaving town. Not to mention that, ironically at the time, they had just signed his sister. Once they watched as Köln made him captain of their under-17 squad, leading him to a streak of 8 goals in 10 matches, demolishing Leverkusen's very own team, before putting down a hat-trick a couple weeks later with a goal from the center of the pitch, straight from kickoff. Well, they decided some players are worth starting a war for. The next day, a whole entourage from the club's CEO to the sporting director and even Rudi Völler himself showed up at the family's home, promising they could make him the next Toni Kroos, the next Michael Ballack, the next Kai Havertz, which definitely sounded way better back then. And before you knew it, they were only paying 50,000 euros in compensation to Köln, with Wirtz moving as a free agent while newspapers quoted his market value over 10 million euros, with The Athletic even naming it the heist of the century, sparking up massive outrage as Leverkusen ended up paying an extra 250,000, hoping that'd be enough to make things right, as Rudi Völler tried to justify the whole thing by saying that it would have been grossly negligent not to enter negotiations, which is just another way of saying that it sucks to suck. Regardless, once at Leverkusen, it was unreal how fast things started moving for Wirtz, with 2 goals and 3 assists in his first 4 matches for their under-19s. Only 3 weeks after his debut, he was was already being moved up to first team training, and only 15 days after turning 17, he was already debuting for the club. But though that made him only the third youngest player in Bundesliga history, and as much as he insisted that it made him feel like a child among men, when a month later he got his first goal, he did it as the youngest in the league's history and against none other than Bayern Munich. That was the moment they should have known this was no average wonder kid. They should have known what was coming. I mean, that first year, Leverkusen collected their highest points tally in 80 years, reached the final of the cup for the first time since 2009, and had their most successful European campaign in over a decade, even though Wirtz was barely even in the team. So, the next season, he took his second warning shot. First, he opened his campaign with a goal. 2 weeks later, he assisted Patrick Schick to get a draw against Stuttgart, then came in late in their first Europa League match, immediately getting another goal and becoming the youngest player to ever be called up to the under-21 German national team. But no matter what, just a week after that, he went on a streak of 4 consecutive games with an assist, even getting one more goal in the Europa League and clutching result after result, meaning that the next month, once Wirtz scored and controversially celebrated as he trashed his old club FC Köln, Leverkusen were undefeated at the top of the league table. However, I guess that celebration brought him some bad karma, because just as Leverkusen offered him an improved contract and newspapers began naming him as the best player nobody's watching, Wirtz went down with a knee injury, and upon coming back, his impact was just not the same, and by April, Leverkusen's form had been flipped on its head, dropping down to 6th place with only 2 wins in 14 matches and leading to the sacking of their manager Peter Bosz. But even with things looking down at club level, that same month, not only did national team manager Joachim Löw decide to call him up for their World Cup qualifiers, but while Wirtz was out with the first team, his under-21 teammates secured qualification to the final stage of the Euros, and once Wirtz joined them, it was game over. 29 seconds into their semi-final match, Wirtz had already scored what was the fastest goal in the tournament's history, and if that wasn't enough, then 7 minutes after that he faked the shot, pulled it to the side and killed the match, sending them to the final, where after a tight game against Portugal, they were named champions of Europe, preparing Wirtz for the year that would cement him as one of the best players in the world. As the new season started, it was expected that Wirtz would have to be slowly eased into the team as he missed the opening game due to a muscular problem, but well, on the very next one, they brought him in with 9 minutes remaining and immediately got his first assist. On the second, they allowed him to come in just a bit sooner. Not only did he get another assist, but he dribbled the keeper to score as well. So, by the third match, they finally put him on a starting 11. 9 minutes in, he had opened the scoring, and by halftime, he had assisted another to put them in front 2-1 against Dortmund. And even though they would end up losing that match, it just kept going, clutching their win against Ferencváros a week later, then doing it again the next match with a goal and assist thanks to 2 incredible runs against Stuttgart, before scoring the winner in the very next match, not just becoming the youngest ever player to reach 10 Bundesliga goals, but being named the league's player of the month against all expectations, somehow still keeping his foot on the gas, scoring against Celtic and adding 1 more assist in each of the next 2 matches, meaning that 9 games into the season, he had contributed to a goal in every single one of them, only being outperformed by Benzema and Haaland across the top 5 leagues, despite the fact that, remember, he had started the season injured on the bench. It was already freakish to watch an 18-year-old leading a whole squad, let alone to watch him outperform the greatest players in Europe. However, the party wouldn't last too long. Starting in November, he went on another run with 7 goal contributions in 5 matches, then in January another 4 in 4, and just as it seemed he was about to pull truly historic numbers, leading Ballon d'Or winner Lothar Matthäus to say that not even I had the skill that he has, as Wirtz went into another match against his former club Köln, with boos running down from the stands, especially since, without him, the club had only barely survived relegation, being forced into the playoffs. Karma must have struck yet again, as 28 minutes into the match, Wirtz went down, immediately calling upon the medical staff as he smacked the ground in pain. At first, they weren't sure what it was since his knee didn't appear to be swollen, but after an MRI, it was confirmed. At 18 years old, Wirtz had ruptured his anterior cruciate ligament, the most common career-ending injury in the sport. No one was quite sure how long he'd be out, how well he'd be able to recover, especially since, with 8 minor injuries in 2.5 years, he was notoriously injury-prone, and as the months kept on going by, more and more bad news followed. The next month, Hansi Flick sadly confessed that had he been fit, he would have called him up for the World Cup. Then, at the end of the season, Wirtz was named in the Bundesliga Team of the Year no matter what, and in October, only 12 matches into their campaign, manager Gerardo Seoane was sacked as Leverkusen fell to second from the bottom, having their worst start since 1979. Which added to the fact that without him, in December, Germany would be knocked out in the group stages of the World Cup for the second time in a row, meant that, for a moment there, it seemed that everything would burn to the ground in his absence. Everyone seems to have this idea that the moment Xabi Alonso took over Leverkusen, things changed immediately, but that isn't real. Over his first 9 matches in charge, they only won 3. In Alonso's own words, there was a moment there on the sidelines when I felt helpless. I asked myself, what am I doing? How did I get here? We were struggling to make everything click, and everyone around the club just kept telling me the same thing. Just wait until Florian comes back. And I thought, okay, I know Florian, good player, but I have to admit, I did not know how great he was until I saw it with my own eyes. After 265 days out, Florian Wirtz made his return. And after getting an assist in his first start, he went on a run of 11 goal contributions in 12 matches. Then, out of nowhere, Leverkusen themselves had gone 12 matches unbeaten, and by the end of the season, Wirtz was already being named as the best young player at the Europa League, which, somehow, still seemed like nothing compared to what he'd do the following year. Look, I think we all know the story. Before Wirtz, across all of Germany, Leverkusen was better known as Neverkusen. 120 years of history and they had never won the league. They had been defeated in damn near every cup final they played. They were cursed. And with Bayern taking 10 Bundesliga titles in a row, to everyone's eyes, the only way to outperform them would be to play the perfect season, to go absolutely unbeaten. And so, that's what they did. That year, they ended them the number 10 shirts, and Wirtz went on to redefine what that number even meant. First cup match, first goal, then comes the league's opening game and he scores the winner against Leipzig. For the next 2 matches, 1 assist each, then another one as well as a goal in the first Europa League game of the season to make himself the player with the most goal contributions in the competition over the previous 3 seasons, despite everything that had happened. And in October, he goes in with an assist against Köln, then scores and pulls off a hat-trick of assists against Karabakh, somehow outdoing himself the very next match, scoring and assisting to lead his team to a 2-1 win against Freiburg, with a goal so impressive that, as Alonso himself said, he just had to stand there and admire him, clap and say, wow. As you may imagine, by the end, he had been named the player of the month, and after a more quiet November with, 3 goal contributions in 5 matches, in December he came back with a goal to clinch a draw against Stuttgart, a goal and an assist against Eintracht Frankfurt, and then 1 more assist, as well as another Player of the Month award. And by February, again, 4 assists in 4 matches, with all 4 coming late into the game as the team needed a winning goal, and guess what? For a 3rd time in 5 months, Florian Wirtz was the Player of the Month. And if that seemed impressive enough, then in March, he scored 3 in the first 4 matches and went out with the national team to go up against France and score the opener 8 seconds into the game, the fastest goal in the history of the national team. And matter of fact, and strangely enough as well, it would have been the fastest goal in the history of all international football had it not been for Baumgartner 3 hours earlier in Slovakia, scoring just 6 seconds into his own match. Regardless, none of that mattered because the highlight of his season was still waiting. In April, Wirtz went in with 2 goals and assists to put Leverkusen in a final of the German Cup, and the next game, he scored the only goal against Union Berlin to make sure that they needed only 1 more victory to be crowned champions. The only problem, before that, there was an Europa League match to be played, and Wirtz got injured. However, even with Alonso keeping him on the bench and claiming that he was only at 70% fitness, he brought him in at halftime and, well, first, he stuck in a wonder strike from 30 yards out. Then, he found himself one-on-one with the keeper and saw it in a second as the fans began rushing the pitch, to which the 20-year-old himself began ordering them to get back to the stands. I'm guessing because he had a job to finish. And on the final minute of the match, he got a 3rd goal, completing the first hat-trick of his career to hand his club the title, as no security guard was capable of stopping one of the greatest pitch invasions of all time, with the referee choosing to end the match then and there, as one of the commentators claimed that this boy is a force of nature. He will be there on par with Beckenbauer, Matthaus and Toni Kroos. And yet, That still wasn't the end of his season. The very next match, still injured, Alonso brought him in as they trailed behind Dortmund and Wirtz assisted the winner again. Then a week later, he opened the scoring in the first leg of their semi-final against Roma, and believe it or not, despite relapsing from his injury and being forced into the bench for the second leg as he watched his team let go of their lead, he came in with only 9 minutes left on the clock, and you can say whatever you want, but in an instant, 2 goals appeared out of thin air to put them in the final, where 2 weeks later he made his way back to the starting 11, no matter if he was fit or not, only to watch the travel dream collapse as Ademola Lookman scored 3 himself to bring them their only defeat of the season and take the title to Bergamo. Still, after years of having nothing to their name, 3 days later, Leverkusen had taken the league and cup double as the first ever team to go unbeaten in the Bundesliga, as Wirtz himself was named the league's player of the season, the Europa League's young player of the year, and had been called up for the Euros, where, as much as there had often been criticism over his performances with the national team supposedly not being on par with those at Leverkusen, and as much as he had never even played the full 90 for them, he went in with a goal in the first match to become the youngest ever German to score at the Euros, pairing up with Musiala to make Germany the first ever team to have 221 scoring in the same match. And then the two proceeded to take over, doing far more than bringing back hope to a nation that had been down on their luck, instead balling out throughout the tournament, making them one of the favorites, especially as Wirtz himself scored in the final minute of their semi-final against Spain to force the game into extra time. And let me tell you, though that night ended on a sad note for the Germans regardless, the impact this season had had won't be forgotten soon. Up till this year, many thought the classic number 10 was dead. Now many claim Wirtz has revived it. If before it was believed that to combine the technique, vision and end product required of a 10, that player would have to be lazy, a complete diva, Wirtz has managed to do all of that while adding the kind of work rate you won't find in many, placing himself in the league's top 10 for duels won and interceptions, in the top 5 for distance covered and sprints per match. This is a prototype for a new kind of footballer, and may God have mercy on his soul, because without injuries, who knows what he could do.